Hello, friends. My name is Amy Kochek, and I am an emotional writing coach. And one thing that I am super passionate about is changing the narrative of our trauma. It is taking the really difficult moments in our lives where sometimes we categorize them as moments to avoid, moments to be ashamed of, or moments wrapped in guilt, and to allow them to be what they really are, which is sometimes our greatest moments of growth and learning and change. And as much as we embrace the happiness and joy of life, I believe that we should embrace the hard times of life. So I love to incorporate my friends, people I've known, people I've met along the way to tell their stories so that as a community, as people, we can start really changing the narrative and sharing our moments of difficulty because they help us grow. And today is no different. One of my most favorite human beings on the planet, travel extraordinaire, kindest, most compassionate human beings on the planet, is here with us today. My dear, dear friend, Benjamin Norman. He is going to introduce himself in a moment, but I just want to say that you all are in for such a treat because not only does Ben have such an incredible story, he has come out of it with so much wisdom and so much to share today. So this one's going to be golden. Ben, thank you so much for being here. Um,
Of course.
so glad to have you. So I want you to start by telling us who you are, what do you do, what are some things that you want to share with us?
Okay, yeah, so I'll go ahead and dive in. So my name is Benjamin Norman, born and raised in Florida. So the first 31 years of my life, I lived in between Orlando metro area. In the last 13 years, I lived in Tampa Bay, which I had the pleasure of meeting our host, Amy. And as far as I do for work, professional life, I am a consultant for PwC. So I work for insurance companies doing software implementation. So very technical, boring work, a far departure of my personality. Um, and yeah, currently I live all over. Right now, my home is based out of Portland, Oregon, which is where I am calling in from now. Earlier this year, I was living in Mexico. And so I am a person of the world. So thank you so much for that very glowing introduction, Amy. I really do appreciate it. And I reciprocate that love back to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I know that in your lifetime, I'm sure that you've had a lot of highs and a lot of lows, but I want you to take us to a specific time in your life where you experienced some sort of trauma or heavy difficulty. Um, Set us up, give us an idea of who you were at the time, what was going on, and then take us to that moment.
Yeah, of course. So I will go to this very seismic shift in my life, which was around the time of COVID. So at the time, I was living in downtown St. Petersburg, Florida. I was, what we would consider a young professional. And I was just full of life. And I think I was at the point in my life where I was at a crossroads where I can continue to follow this very scripted life, what my parents and society has kind of conditioned me to believe, or I can build my own life and cultivate my own dreams. So to set this story up, this was the very beginning of 2020. I was 29, getting ready to turn 30, March the 11th of 2020. And I remember, thinking like, oh man, that's going to be an amazing year because I had all of these expectations of what 30 should be, what it looks like. And so the year prior, I just became a consultant for the first time. So I worked for insurance companies as a underwriter and as a business analyst. So I shifted my career right around 29 to becoming a consultant. So it's a very specialized work. And I was so proud of myself because, I, worked for so many years, probably 5 to 6 years. And I was really just grinding, like trying to move up that corporate ladder. And then I was finally able to cross over this financial benchmark, which a lot of young people, set for themselves, by the time they're 30, they're like, well, I want to make, six figures or more. And so that was, a goal of mine that I really wanted to obtain. So I was able to do that at 29. But at 2020, it kind of, my whole world came crashing down. So in February of 2020, I lost my job. So here I am living in downtown St. Petersburg, at that time, reasonably affordable, but still kind of expensive. And here I am, on the cusp of turning 30, and I lose my job. And for me, the reason why it was so seismic is because it really, my job was my identity, and I felt like I really did not know who I was without a job. Because, here in Western society, we tie, career, materialistic things, homes, cars, material possessions as part of your identity. And that's what I was conditioned to believe. So without that, I had no idea really who I was without that. I felt so much shame and embarrassment from losing a job. And I really did not express that to many of the people I knew. Only really my close friends and family knew, the loss of my job. And, coupled with that, we were just entering right into COVID, which was so foreign to most people around the world. We really never experienced anything remotely close to that in our lifetime. So it was a very challenging time in my life. I remember just being so chronically depressed and without really much hope for myself to really recover. So that year preceding in 2019, I just got this job. I was able to travel the world, travel internationally and domestically. I was able to, come out of a lot of debt. I was able to save a lot of money. So coming off of a really high to now being met with a really low for the first time, I didn't have the emotional equipment to deal with that on my own. So I was really, that was for me when I really hit rock bottom at 30 years old. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, wow, what a way to turn 30. You are now unemployed. And then I remember I gained about 50 pounds within a year, which, people that knew me previously, I've always been a string bean. I was always kind of like on the lean, slender side. And now, a year later, you have a more plump, rounder Ben. So there was a lot going on for me in 2020. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is a really difficult time for me. And at that, in those moments, I really did not know how I was gonna come out of it, because I, was basically living off of my life savings, and I was, at a point to where I was really desperate to be able to sustain my, housing, my car. And I just had like this very reoccurring thought like, gosh, I've worked so hard to get my degrees. I've worked so hard to build a career, and it's all going to be lost within the span of a few months. And um, and I think also leading back to what I said, I had so much shame and guilt associated with that, is because I felt I lived so much of my life trying to be a people pleaser, which the two primary people of that focus were my parents. So I felt as though I was letting my parents down, with all of the hard work and investment they put into raising me. And now here I am at, kind of the prime of my adulthood, for at least for a young adult, and for me to kind of come crashing down. So all of these things were basically playing into my mindset. And then I would have people like you and other friends that would, try to encourage me. And it's one of those moments where you take the encouragement, but it's not able to be applied because you're so low, where you're kind of like, thank you, but this is never going to work for me. It's just like
Mm.
nothing's going to work. I'm going to be homeless. I'm just never going to recover. And that for me changed my life forever. I am totally not the same person I was in 2020. I came out on that, with so much, um, I guess, drive and resiliency to not return back to that mental state where I was previously.
I mean, you said so much. I love, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that moment in your life. If we can go back there, you said so much about carrying the weight of your parents, like wanting to please your parents. Can you talk more about that weight
Mhm.
and why you felt that drove so many of your decisions? Because I think that speaks to a lot of us.
Yes, of course. So I grew up in a very religious household, and my parents bestowed a lot of expectations upon me to, be the model, son. And then, for me, I am of African American descent. So there's a lot of pressure on, young Black men to succeed because, society has told us, Black men are dangerous. All of these narratives that have been told about Black men. So my parents really wanted to shift that narrative with their children and to steer us in the direction of, academic excellence, manners, all of these things that kind of, should lead us to a better quality of life. And so, with those expectations that were so high and critical for me to succeed, I immediately associated that with my job loss. And I'm like, wow, I am a complete, utter failure to my parents because my parents spent so much time, trying to make me be the perfect, representation for a community that's kind of underserved in that regard. So I felt this immense pressure to, have this very perfect curated life. And, at that moment, well, preceding that moment, I was 29. I was a six-figure income earner. And, my parents were very proud of that. So to come immediately thereafter, it was like this seismic shift in of like, oh God, I've now failed my parents. And now I'm taking on all of this guilt, shame, embarrassment. And I've really internalized that all of 2020. So I basically just turned to food and alcohol. I basically just would pull up in my apartment and I would, binge drink and binge eat. I would sleep all day. There would be days I literally could not even get out of bed because I was just so chronically depressed where I was physically ill. And, looking at myself in the mirror, I did not recognize the person that was in the reflection of the mirror. And there was many days that I would, just break down and just cry all day because I felt as though my life is over. And I feel for that person now so badly for that person because that person should not have felt that amount of weight upon them. And, if I can go back to myself 3 years ago, I would give that person the biggest, warmest hug and say everything is going to be okay. Because that person needed a lot of emotional support. Um, and I did receive that from my parents. I'm a very hyper individual person, and I sometimes don't like to accept help because accepting help means that I am incapable of surmounting a goal or whatever the case may be. And so I have now learned accepting help does not mean that I'm weak or incapable in any capacity. It's refreshing, that you have loved ones that want to help you, and that is what I've learned thereafter. That huge moment in my life.
Yeah. So let's go to the moment of just extreme hopelessness and the tears and just feeling like there's no way out. When did that start to shift for you? Was it a person, a conversation? Was it you just pulling yourself out of it? Like, what does the turning point for that look like? Because obviously, look at you, this fabulous human being in front of us.
Yeah, to answer that, I think okay, so going back to February of 2020, like bottom of bottom. And I think I was gaining some momentum with prospects of jobs and I was gaining hope. We were coming out of a little bit of, at least in Florida, out of the COVID lockdowns, and I felt as though like jobs were getting ready to like resume back to hiring people and bringing people back into the office. So I think around maybe like late August, early September is where I started feeling like a lot of renewed vigor. Like, okay, well, it's been about 6 months and I'm getting ready to like go back to work. I can feel this kinetic energy, and I really believe in positive energy, and what you put out into the universe is going to eventually be returned back to you. So basically, that's where I, started feeling a sense of extreme hope, to the point to where I booked a trip, because once again, although I'm flat broke, I'm still was willing to travel. And I remember taking a trip out to the Pacific Northwest, to Seattle and Portland, and to be specific, and that is what led me to move here. Had I not taken that leap of faith in my lowest point in life, I would have never moved here to Portland, Oregon. So the tears had started to dry up. I started to like pull myself up, and I remember thinking like, it's not the end of the world. I'm gonna get a job. It's right around the corner. The job that I thought I was going to get kind of fell through. So I kind of went back down a little bit. And I'm like, but at that point, I also have a dark sense of humor. I'm like, well, that didn't work out. So, if I am gonna be homeless, I guess I will be a pretty awesome homeless person. Because don't I have a story to tell? So this is now like around October, and I was still like hustling, interviewing and applying for jobs. And then that November is where it all clicked. These two companies at the same time reached out. They loved my LinkedIn profile, they loved my experience. They thought I would be this ideal candidate. One of the companies was my current employer, and another was an insurance company based out of Clearwater. So my current company, I saw the DM message and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this job. It's PwC. Like, it's a global powerhouse of a company, highly esteemed, literally no way. I mean, because again, I'm in this mindset like nothing is going to really work out. I'm kind of hopeful, but not too hopeful. The other company I interviewed, crushed it. The rest was history. I, going through the interview process with PwC, and I'm just like, man, I'm like continually to advance through each round of interview. And I'm like, am I going to get this job? That's literally my thought. I'm like, I might actually get this job, but also I'm like, but no, I'm not. Because like, let's be for real. And I remember getting to the final round, and I'm like, oh my God, my life is really going to do a 180 if I'm able to secure this job. And that December, so I will never forget this day. I remember December 22nd, 2020, getting a call from the HR representative from PwC. You did an excellent job in all of your rounds of interviews. There were only glowing remarks about you. We're so excited to bring you part of our team. And I remember literally shaking, like, because I was so overcome with emotion. And I remember, like, literally running out of my apartment, crying, like, literally tears flowing down my face because I felt like the weight of the world had finally been lifted off of my shoulders. And I was finally rewarded with this very long and arduous test that the universe tested me with. And I feel like it was so life changing. And from that moment going forward, my mindset has completely shifted. So it would take so much for me to get back to that point I was in early 2020 to go back to that mindset. I feel as though I have like a body shield of armor, all around me, because I feel like a totally different and renewed person thereafter.
I love that. When you when you got out of the moment of feeling hopeless and now you have this amazing, incredible job, which is so funny. I remember before that, like right before you got this job, you were trying to like make extra money, so you were making red velvet cakes.
Yes.
I remember that. Um,
Yeah.
and no sooner after, it's like life changing.
Hmm.
So now that you're on the other side of it and you are living this renewed existence, if you can look back at that moment, what are you the most grateful for being able to receive from that entire experience? Because, of course, like every traumatic experience, we receive something that we can hold on to. What do you think
Hmm.
you received from that?
Patience. I received a humble pie of patience. Um, or should I say a humble red velvet cake?
Yes, yes.
And just a touch on the red velvet cake, yeah, I remember holiday season of 2020, my money, life savings was running really low. And I was like a deer in headlights. I was like, I only probably have about 6 weeks of runway left before checking and savings is at zero. And I was like, well, I'm cooking a lot. I'm experimenting with baking and all of this. So my mom gave me her mother's red velvet cake recipe. And then I was like, hey, you need to buy a cake because I got bills to pay. So many people bought cakes, and I was able to pay essentially almost my entire month's rent from doing so.
Yeah.
So I was so appreciative of that. But to tie back into your question, what I learned from that was extreme patience. I feel as though, with myself, speaking only for myself, I was a very impatient person. I wanted things to be on my terms, on my time, and I never really allowed the process to really see itself through all the way before I'm like ready to expedite the process. And what I learned is like, dude, you're not in control here. Like these things are not in your control. So there's really no reason to fret over, these ancillary things that you have no control over. And so when I learned patience, that was my biggest takeaway from this, life changing event. And it's made me so much more of a patient and humble and extremely grateful person. I don't take anything for granted. I don't think, 2.5 years after that event, I don't look at myself as like, oh, look at me, like, look at this, amazing, beautiful life that I am so lucky to live. I literally wake up every day and I am reminded of how grateful and privileged I am to be able to do something like this. So that was my biggest takeaway is just to learn some patience. And, you know, 10 months later, I was rewarded with the biggest, gift of all.
I love that. One last thing that I want you to talk to us about, or really to talk to the audience about. So many people, even just from the job loss perspective and finding your identity in your work, so many people can speak to that, myself included. But I want you to talk directly to somebody who may be in the midst of something that feels incredibly hopeless, that feels like I've worked so hard for nothing. And they're just at a very, very low moment. And even just the thought of like looking at yourself from 3 years ago, what would you say to that individual? What do they need to hear?
That is a great question because I feel as though my testimony can be applied to many situations of hopelessness, especially to the niche category of job, losing a job. And what I would say to that person is, and it sounds like a cliche, and I know it is a cliche, but you really cannot give up. You just have to pull yourself up and really just continue to just be relentless and don't allow the answer no really affect you personally. And then, like, when one door closes, another huge, beautiful door is going to open. We just don't know when. And I think we're so conditioned into believing like it needs to be immediately, like I need to have this now. And like I alluded to a few moments ago, is like what it's really showing you is to that one, you're not in control, and then two, you just have to be patient. Um, you don't know if it's going to be 1 month, 1 year, or 3 years, but eventually you're going to find your way back to yourself, or you're going to find your way to a totally brand new person. So you just have to, unfortunately, buckle up and not necessarily enjoy the ride, but be very aware of the ride and take it all in and learn about yourself in that process. And once you come out on the other side of that process, be to go back and reflect. How was I before this event, and how am now after the event? And take that inventory of yourself and see where you can make changes, where you may have done things a lot differently. It's really good to take that moment to really do a personal inventory of yourself in those moments. And I can say for myself, I wasn't really living my true life. Like I said, I had these expectations of my parents, and thereafter I examined myself. I'm like, well, would I be affected if I lose my job now? Now, like seeing if I were to lose my job now, yeah, it would suck, but I probably would not care as much because I don't have all of those assignments of shame, guilt, embarrassment assigned to losing a job. It's part of life. And if PwC came to me today or tomorrow or whenever and said, "Hey, like your services are no longer needed," it does not. It would literally just roll off of me. I would not care. So for me, I feel so happy in knowing that I learned this incredible lesson. And I am, like I said, very grateful. I try to eat a big slice of humble pie every single morning. And, I think that's the things that I wanted to underscore in this great platform that you're giving your friends and family and colleagues, sharing their personal, most intimate stories about themselves. So those are the items that I wanted to underscore.
I love it. You have told such a masterfully beautiful story that has just spoke to my heart in so many ways. And I know to so many other people, there's something so powerful about listening to somebody's journey because you can always find yourself in it, but also you can just understand we're all just doing the best that we can with the
Yeah.
information that we have. Um, how can people find you? How can people contact you?
Yeah, people can find me. I'm most active on social. So you can find me at the handle Been Going Places. So that is where you would get a chance to interact with me, and you get a chance to see, the travels that I take. I'm a very adventure seeking person. I love travel. That is really at the core of my being. So Been Going Places is the handle. My email, if you want to email or correspond that way, it is B as in Ben, K as in Keith, Norman at iCloud.com. If you want to connect, I will be more than happy to connect with you.
I love that. Definitely been going places on Instagram. You all should definitely check that out. I'm going to put all of those in the comments so you all can have access, but except for your phone number. I'm not going to put that in the I don't want stalkers. I don't want Ben being stalked so he has to go places.
Yes.
We're not going to do that. But thank you so much, Ben, for being here. Thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing such a beautiful story that I know is going to impact so many people and help them along their journey, because that's why we're here. That's the beauty of story and connection and really sharing your darkest moments, because in our darkest moments is usually where we find our light. And I am
Yes.
so, so grateful that that has been your experience. So thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate you and I love you. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and join me next time on For Your Story, For Your Life.